religion biologically hardwired into humans?
Hey everybody, I highly recommend checking out the rest of that video. I think Andrew does a great job of summarizing one of the consensus views within the cognitive science of religion. Now, the specific theory he's talking about, the hyperactive agency detection device, comes from Justin Barrett. It's slightly outdated and relies a bit on the theory of cognitive modularity, the idea that our brains have areas that are specialized to perform one function, and I'm a bit more of a cognitive generalist, the notion that functions are kind of spread all over the brain and not localized and compartmentalized. But the notion that deity concepts and concepts of the afterlife and spirits and ghosts develop from our hypersensitivity to agency, absolutely still the consensus view, even as the theory is getting more mature and complex. So check it out.
Challenge anybody to find one piece of information in the Bible that you can prove to be false.
Buckle up, Adam. This one's
I appreciate this poster's combating inerrancy, but he's going about it all wrong.
Talk about how a single alteration of that verse is one of the biggest reasons.
This variant has nothing to do with the roots of Christ's identification with God.
So focus on this one part. Who was manifest in flesh? Letters for who are Omicron and Zeta.
That's a sigma, that's not a zeta. Also, he dates the variant to the medieval period. It's actually Byzantine, it's much earlier. Now, he's going to write a different kind of sigma that was used in those manuscripts. In the Byzantine period, the sigma looked like a capital C, so these two words would have been virtually identical. That little line was the only difference. So this variant is probably accidental, not intentional.
This is called an anti-adoptionist change.
Adoptionism is promoted in Mark. That's really the strongest place we find it. Other gospels use different frameworks, and the identification of Jesus with God has roots that go back to the identification of the angel of the Lord with God.
This is not at all Jesus claiming to be equal with God, much less claiming to be God himself.
Hey everybody, I wanted to comment on this related video to the previous one I did. This individual says that Jesus claiming to be able to forgive sins is just a parallel with priests forgiving sins, but that has nothing to do with ancient Israelite or Jewish ideology. The priest was not the one who had the agency to forgive sins. They simply facilitated the actions. It was God who was thought to forgive sins. But the parallel with Jesus is actually from Exodus 23, where God tells the Israelites that he's going to send an angel before him and to not disobey that angel because he had the authority not to forgive their sins because his name was in him. And this is where we get the indwelling of the name, and this is where we get the identification of Jesus with God based on the parallel of the messenger of the Lord constantly being identified as God, as in Exodus 3. Everybody, let's talk about how Jesus became identified with God. This goes all the way back to the angel of the Lord in the Hebrew Bible, who is frequently identified with God himself, but that's originally the result of textual interpolation. Later, however, some writers decide to try to accommodate it to their theology, and we get in Exodus 23 this idea that the angel can exercise divine prerogatives as a result of having the divine name in him. Greco-Roman period pseudepigraphic literature elaborates on this concept with the figure of the Son of Man in Ancient of Days from Daniel 7, and we get this idea of a mediatory figure who possesses God's name and exercises God's authority. Christianity picks up on this, and so you have Jesus using the phrase, particularly in the Gospel of John, ego eimi, which is the ancient Greek translation of echia asher echia from Exodus 3, God's self-identification. And what Christianity is doing is saying Jesus possesses the divine name, can therefore exercise divine prerogatives and identify in some hazy way with God. The Trinity is a philosophical rationalization of this from the 3rd and 4th century.
I promised you guys we'd talk about how Adam in Genesis is a god, and I don't know if I'm going to fit all of this.
Okay, pretty much all the information in this video is wildly off base. This has nothing to do with any Sumerian creation account. In fact, she's actually addressing the details from a much later Babylonian creation account. The etymology is also all wrong, and it absolutely is a reference to Yahweh. It's the later of the two creation accounts written during the Babylonian exile. However, there are two things that she said. One, that they wanted to make an idol. There is a sense in which the creation account is a way to say, humanity, you all are God's divine image, therefore do not worship other divine images. Also, the comment about Adam being God. Adam was not a god. However, the point of driving them out of the Garden of Eden was to prevent them from gaining both of the two prototypical features of deity. The first is knowledge of good and evil, which is a merism for all knowledge, and the second is immortality. If they had those two things, as the serpent said, they would have been deities. Everybody, quick Bible fact for you, and that is that leprosy, better known today as Hansen's disease, does not appear a single time in the Bible. If your English translation has it, it's wrong. And here's why. The Hebrew term sara'at and the Greek term lepra actually refer to a variety of skin diseases that are quite a bit more benign, less communicable, and able to be healed. Vitiligo is an example of a disease that probably belongs in this group. And this is more about ritual impurity in the Bible than about something that's going to harm people. But what happened in the Renaissance period, there were a bunch of classical texts that had been preserved in Arabic translation that were translated back into Greek and Latin. And the Greek term lepra was accidentally used to translate references to Hansen's disease. And from that use of lepra, we get the term leprosy. And so it's a mistranslation. It has nothing to do with leprosy when you see it in the Bible. And the concern is ritual impurity, not harm to others. Hey everybody, I see claims like this pop up every now and then, usually around Christmas or Easter. 100% false, entirely made up. Hey, thanks for the comment. I am happy to do what I can to elaborate. Unfortunately, there's not a ton to this. These claims have proliferated in recent years, but they come from a 19th century book called The Natural Genesis, written by a guy named Gerald Massey. Now, he was an English poet and a spiritualist, and he liked ancient Egypt, like a lot of people did back then. And he argued that Western religions are all rooted in Egyptian religion. And he uses a lot of very strained and sometimes just nonsensical etymological arguments. And most of the stuff he's talking about has no basis in any Egyptian text. The only thing I can find that has any legitimacy at all is probably his connection to this tradition of the dying and rising God, which is a framework that isn't used anymore. It's pretty outdated. There's no good case for compartmentalizing it, but it has reference to these traditions of deities descending to the underworld and then coming back, usually in the spring, to explain the cycle of seasons and how life returns every year. So, hey everybody, cool story from 2 Kings 3. This whole chapter is about an Israelite, Judahite, Edomite coalition that set out to punish Moab for trying to throw off Israelite vassalage after the death of the king Ahab. Before they head out, Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, says we need Yahweh's blessing on this. So they visit Elisha the prophet, who tells them Yahweh will deliver the Moabites into your hands. Along the way, they're destroying one city after another, and they get to the city where the king of Moab is holed up. They're about to take the city, and then the king of Moab offers his firstborn son as a sacrifice on the wall. And the text in verse 27 says there was Ketzef Gadol, great fury against Israel, and the troops pack up and head home. Ketzef Gadol refers to divine fury. There's only one way to read this text. Sacrifice worked. The Moabite deity Chemosh defeated Yahweh, drove off the Israelite forces, and the author of 2 Kings had to acknowledge it.
Great question. Let's talk about it. First, I highly recommend this book on this topic.
Hey everybody, I thought I'd comment on this video. Like so many videos, it's mixing good information with bad. First, the bad. They are telescoping a lot of texts that occur across about a millennia of time in order to try and treat it as if it was stolen wholesale. But these are fragments from very different ideological, rhetorical, sociocultural, material contexts that are saying many different things, and trying to fit it all into a single narrative that was just stolen is pejorative nonsense. The Ugaritic civilization was destroyed centuries before Hebrew ever existed as a language. So more likely, they're borrowing from a shared sociocultural matrix. Now, the good. Yes, many deities in early Israelite worship and ideology. Asherah was the consort of Yahweh. Deuteronomy 32:8 is understood by many scholars, myself included, to distinguish El Elyon from Yahweh.